All right, let's get started here. Again, rapid fire here. We're running through the day. As you can see, hopefully on your screen, the next session is on 3Dep for the Nation, the countdown to 2023. And so I am going to hand the virtual non-existent microphone over to Linda to take us away. Linda.
Thank you, Jake. And yes, welcome to the session. We're going to have two sets of speakers. Vicki Lucas, the Chief of the Topographic Data Services with the USGS National Geospatial Program, is going to fill us in on a federal perspective, and then we'll hear from some of our NSGIC leadership on the state perspective. And with that, I'll hand it over to Vicki.
All right, thanks, Linda. And Sue hopefully is going to get the slides going here. Thanks, everybody. It's really great to be back at NSGIC and really appreciate the chance to talk about 3Dep. Next slide, Sue. And I think Kevin did a really great job of talking about kind of our history of 3Dep and the exciting progress we're making in partnership with all of you. We really started this program with the first full year of production in 2016. And so our target for the 8-year cycle is to complete by 2023. This would be our first ever national baseline of consistent high resolution data collected in a time frame that is less than a decade, which is pretty significant because it replaces data that was collected over multiple decades and using multiple technologies. So it's really the first consistent data collected with consistent technology and set of specifications. And we're doing great, but we still have more work to do. And so this session is to talk about strategies for completing this job. Next. So one of the key things that we always need to do is talk about the so what of 3Dep, and that is the applications. What are the important applications that are enabled by having 3Dep data? And so the NSGIC 3Dep for the Nation project is really important point for that. And so collecting the state story maps. We're going to focus some more on user cases in this next round, and the state plans are really helpful. So thank you very much for your support on that. Just a few other things to highlight here. You know, we have tons of applications, but just some ones that are helping us fill in some of our gaps recently are the hurricane and wildfire response. We received supplemental funding for that, about $28 million that we were able to leverage with partner funding and collect about $68 million worth of data. We have the Earth MRI initiative at the USGS to collect geophysical and lidar data to support critical minerals applications, and that's helping us fill in gaps, for instance, in Nevada this year. And also I wanted to point out the FCC broadband development application. That is something we're seeing emerging. FCC has some language in its appropriation, its House appropriation bill, that points out the need for data for broadband development. And so we're hoping to build a relationship with FCC moving forward. Next slide. And those are just a few examples. I also wanted to point out that there is a national landslide legislation that has been signed off by both the House and recently the Senate. It needs to be reconciled and signed off into law, but it's significant because it brings visibility to 3Dep. It codifies the governance. So Kevin talked about you know, the excellent governance that we have with the federal agencies in the executive forum and the working group. There are a few agencies out there that we'd like to better bring into the fold, so this could help us do that. And then also the legislation creates a subcommittee under NGIC where we could receive ongoing feedback from the broader community. So we're hoping that will kind of get across the finish line. Next. And just a shout out to the 3Dep Coalition. NSGIC is a part of that, as well as many other groups. All of the communication, the advocacy, I think has made a huge difference to some of this legislation moving forward, and you know, really continue to need to see that to finish this job off. Next. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the cost to complete 3Dep. And we have a website called 3DEP by the numbers. The URL is on the slide, and every year we update this. So we look at our expenditures, we estimate what we think we'll get based on our president's budget and what we see among our partners, and do kind of a rough ballpark estimate of the remaining amount of funding that is needed. And this is important for our communications, and we estimated 161 million at the end of FY19. We're going to be updating this very soon with the work that was done in FY20, so look for this to be updated in this fall. Next. We're also working on kind of refining our estimates. So when we started the project, you know, we really estimated the nation based on an average cost per square mile. And we know there are a lot of more nuances to the costs of projects when you actually get down to contracting them. So now that we have about, you know, 25 to 20% of the nation remaining for coverage, we're looking at refining those costs so we can get more accurate estimate. And so we're working on a model that has various inputs that help us understand the cost factors. And so we have a map that looks at kind of the relative cost of each 30 meter cell. And then we're grouping those into collection units. And on this map on the right, the units that we're using are hydrologic units. These are HUC-12s, I believe, for the remaining areas where we don't have 3DEP coverage. And then we're normalizing costs across those collection areas. So next slide. And we can use that to kind of break down the cost. So the idea here is to, let's create more bite-sized pieces to finish the job of nationwide coverage. So we have aggregated $5 million groupings, and to just kind of show how we could work towards getting the completion done. You know, we hope this will help us be ready with ballpark cost estimates, with supplementals, if there are more supplementals that come forward, or other opportunities, say an infrastructure bill. We might want to think about an approach like an adoptive block strategy to complete coverage for all of these areas. And so it's a tool for high-level planning. We were going to make it available on the 3DEP by the numbers page so people can kind of use it in their communications. We've received some good feedback about this approach from some of our stakeholders. We are further refining this. You know, we want to have some more state inputs into it, and so we invite you to the 3DEP interest group to come discuss this approach. And that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to you, Linda.
I'm here. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, Frank, you're on.
All right. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing that throughout most of my career, 3D GIS has been the next thing that's always coming. Well, it really feels good that, that we're really getting there. So hats off to everyone involved. You know, I want to touch on the coordination aspects of that within the state. And, you know, it was really nothing all that special, but the need for 3D just came through meeting after meeting with our Geospatial Advisory Council, with the meetings that we have with the folks that support GIS in all the agencies, and through our participation in workshops, and it was just this constant heartbeat. And, you know, it was serendipitous that we included in the New York State orthoimagery contract options to collect lidar at the various quality levels. And it was great that we had that framework of quality levels that were well understood to use there. And we didn't have to go out and do a special budget approval for an elevation data program, because it was the same contract. The savings that we accrued from competitive bidding that or imagery contract several times is the funding that we use to pull together the elevation program. To the budget folks, it was just the same contract. To us GIS folks, it was something very different and really exciting. So that was really good, and part of the focus there was to shift from this project into a program. The office that I manage is called the GIS Program Office, and we're not really interested in projects anymore. We still do them from time to time, but a project is for a very specific and defined area, and it's a very specific and defined use, and maybe you wind up with disparate data that then is on the shelf after the project is over. Well, the thing that's really different and exciting about a program is that we always fail when we try to anticipate all the needs that will be met by a program, you know, and needs from understanding investments in maple sugar production to archaeological needs within the state. There's no way we would have anticipated all those, but because of a program with continuous coverage and broad area and consistent products that get stitched together now, we just let it rip with all kinds of great uses. You know, the business cases for 3D data across the nation have really shined through more than ever. There's a virtual representation of our world that is just that much more realistic. And one of the ingredients that is keeping the wheels on our economy, there are online real estate transactions and all kinds of business that used to have to happen in the field is now happening safely from home with folks behind their computers. And it's pretty heartening to see that happening. So that's all I have.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get rolling with my little bit contribution here. So from Wyoming, I'm going to share a use case that was not the justification for getting LIDAR for our state. We are very much benefiting from FEMA and their underwriting of capturing LIDAR for our entire state at this point. So thank you to FEMA. But what use case I'm going to describe is what I hope to be a justification for derivative products that Wyoming will get. So cheatgrass is an annual invasive species, an annual invasive grass that spreads easily. It really likes to take root after any kind of disruption like wildfire or surface disturbance like energy development. And it just becomes a monoculture, which means it overcompetes any other vegetation and just dominates the landscape, which is not good in western states like Wyoming that have a lot of agriculture and a lot of wildlife resources that need lush, diverse vegetation for better production of those those animals. And so cheatgrass is an issue, and our governor has taken interest in that, and he created a task force to look at what we can do to address invasive species. And one of the desired outcome from this project was to see if we could map the current extent of LIDAR. So knowing that cheatgrass was a hot topic, I threw it out to Wolpert, and I just can't thank Wolpert enough for what they have done. They took it upon themselves to test this out. I threw out, can you use LIDAR to map cheatgrass? And so they said, well, I don't know, let's figure it out. And by golly, they did. And so what they, if you can advance the slide, what they did was, as they were collecting LIDAR for FEMA, they also collected color infrared imagery at the same time. And so what they developed is a two-stage analysis process where they first use the unique signature of cheatgrass when it's coming to its peak of maturity, and that indicates areas of likely cheatgrass infestation. And then, next slide. So they highlight those areas from that supervised classification, detecting that unique signature, and create polygons based on that signature. And then next, they overlay the LIDAR data where they can, tease out the heights of the vegetation. So they, of course, remove ground surface, and then cheatgrass usually only grows, doesn't grow more than like 18 inches. So they remove anything over that. And what it gives them is these, areas of likely cheatgrass infestation. And then the next step is to see if we can get to the density of cheatgrass in those areas. So, and if you want to go to the absolute next one, last one, I think, of mine, might be the last. But so that shows, based on the two-step process, where these areas might have cheatgrass. And of course, it's better informed by the more field data that we have. And it was QL2 data. And so what we found is, it's just fascinating. And so we've got a pilot project that we're trying to do for Sublette County. And they're also, Wolpert is working on doing this for 2 counties in northern Wyoming for other invasive species, Medusa head and Ventonata. And so it's just really cool that, we're trying to innovate and use the technology to solve very real on the ground issues and try to transport it, to a statewide effort, and then figure out how we could afford to repeat the process to see how we're doing. And so, the benefit is, again, to inform the decision makers about the current extent and figure out using, spatial analysis with critical wildlife areas, ag production, elevation, of course, slope, all that, but really figure out where are the most important areas that we should focus our treatment efforts and prioritize, because we can't treat the whole state. We have to pick and choose. And so we have to, use the best data available to find out where those areas are. And part of the conversation is, well, should you treat areas where it's just now starting to break out and try to get it while it's not so big, or, get areas that are closer to critical habitats? So again, part of the decision-making process in Wyoming for how we use this data going forward. And I certainly hope that Wolpert will give an in-depth presentation on this and their process at some future NSGIC conference. And I know that other states are interested in piloting and applying it in their states too. So pretty exciting. I certainly look forward to seeing how it comes together for our pilot in Sublette County and how we can, again, expand it to be a derivative that we can get for the whole state. So thanks again to Wolpert. And with that, I will turn it back to Linda.
Molly, you're up.
All right, so I will speak just very, very briefly here on the value and use of legislation and, using the opportunity to consider legislation to complete your statewide coverage. So the power of a champion, and this is something that we discuss a lot in the 3DEP interest group and the active groups in the project. A champion can inform the administrative and legislative community, enlist other legislators, draft that legislation, actively promote acquisition, and then identify and secure funding. So it's an extremely helpful role as you're trying to achieve that statewide coverage. An example, a state example of legislation that has been really effective is Florida. So after Hurricane Irma, the legislation appropriated $15 million for new lidar data because the new floodplain models were needed to help predict the extent and magnitude of the flooding. Later did a study, and annual net benefits were projected to exceed 21 million with a benefit cost ratio of 3.7 to 1. So very valuable there. And important to note, as Karen did, that the private sector played a key role in making this happen. So the private sector was actually able to lobby the legislature to get that bill through. The second piece here is enacting GIS model laws. So developing and maintaining framework data, providing open data access, and then also really important here, establishing a GIS funding account to protect, having protected funds, allowing for the collection and pooling of contributions. A couple of examples here, and again, I don't really have time to give you much detail, but I would encourage you to speak to these states about this specifically. Arizona and Indiana, two great examples of having laws in place that allow for this particular, the collection and pooling of contributions and money that will stay where we need it to stay in GIS. And then the last piece here is engaging the private sector. They are technical experts. They're able to coordinate closely with federal agencies and other stakeholders, and also able to work directly with administrators and legislators. Okay, next slide. So I will just wrap us up really quickly, and we may have a minute for questions. I'll leave that to Linda, but you know, the challenge to this group now is, what is your next step? As we've said this afternoon, we're at about 74% national coverage. So, you know, how do you intend to move forward? Now is the time to really consider that. And there are some ideas here and how you might move forward. We certainly would invite you to become part of the 3DEP for the Nation community, which involves coming to the 3DEP interest group, perhaps the meeting here this week, getting involved on my NSGIC, or even reaching out to me or to Linda or Phil to become more involved in the project overall. How's that, Linda?
Great job, great job. I don't think we have much time. I'll let Jake take it back.
We have about, I'd say, 2 or 3 minutes. So there was one question in the chat that it looks like Dan Ross answered, but I'll pose it to the group of presenters here, and that is, what type of information or visuals tend to be most well received when clarifying the importance of GIS model legislation to legislators?
Why don't we throw that to Tennessee, Arizona, or Indiana to respond to? Dennis, do I have to call on you?
Well, Jay, could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure thing. Yeah. So it's what type of information / visuals tend to be most well received when clarifying the importance of GIS model legislation to legislators?
To legislators, fortunately, we didn't have to undertake that task to educate the legislative community in our state. We had, and I put this in the chat box, we have a GIS savings account for building out framework data. That's a collection of funding from state agencies, local governments. But you know, practically thinking about your question, though, you know, it's in the origins of our program in Tennessee, similar to Florida, relate back to the FEMA flood mapping efforts through Tennessee is actually a cooperating technical partner that's part of the FEMA framework for developing risk map data products. So that was the initial business driver for us, and then it just kind of had the snowball effect, if you will, of after doing outreach and business planning efforts. It just grew from there with other federal partners and local partners across the state.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? Alternatively, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll let the community know. I have captured the chat questions, and we'll be posting those to the 3DEP interest group so we can follow up on any of these items we didn't get to. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I guess then we will transition into our next session. So state reps and the people who are supposed to be at Speed Networking, that is what's up next for you. So head on over to Speed Networking. Speed Networking. Again, the link is in the agenda. Everyone else, the lounges will be open, and they will continue to be open until the reception, the hospitality suite later this evening. So Speed Networking, lounges, hospitality suite. We'll see you again soon. Thank you all.